Hello trumpet players, this is the official promo video for our new tonalization study book. This is called the Trumpet Pioneer Tonalization Studies, and in this book we're going to talk about what is it, who should buy it, and why. The tonalization studies are a series of scales that I developed in the 80s, about 1984-85, around there. And I've been using it with my students. I've been practicing them myself all this time, almost 40 years now. Um, they've grown into an entire system of exercises and based on your skill level. And the pioneer skill level in my system is the beginner level. So the Trumpet Pioneer Tonalization Studies book is a book for beginner trumpet players mostly. We'll get to the exception to that later. There is an exception. But it's a beginner book. It's to help you get started in the scales. And more importantly, we call it scales in the trumpet world. It's not scales. There's scale exercises, but the scales are to help you learn the key. The key is the important part. Scales have a beginning and an end that doesn't fit with music. Da da pa 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 da 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 da, right? That doesn't always fit with music. What about da dee da 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 da, right? That's not in your scale. The tonalization studies are a system of scale patterns that fill your whole range. So the patterns, for example, start off 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, like that. Da da dee da 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 dee da da dee, right? We have that first, and then we switch it around. Dee da 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 dee da da. That's number 2. And each one of these goes to your top range, down to your bottom of the range, and then to the beginning note again. Now, before we do that, we have to be introduced to the key. And that's what makes this book different from my other tonalization study books. And we're going to redo all those books because this works. I love it. I'm chomping at the bit to use this as it is in this book with future students. Now, I use the concept with future students. In this case, what I'm talking about is the actual forms in the book. There's forms in the book. When you finish the exercise, you cross it off on the form. I'm very excited about that. It allows people to see their progress and stuff like that. So we're very excited about that. The other books don't have that. I should probably mention at this point that in the past we had this book on our website as 3 separate, what we were calling back then, modules. Our definition of modules has changed since then, so we're not calling those types of things modules anymore, and we're going to bring back modules again, but not like that. But we used to sell 3 different modules. All 3 of those modules are now in this book. We've got the expansion studies. These are very important, very beneficial. That used to be a separate module. Then we have what I call beginner tonalization studies. What makes them beginner is that I made in quarter note, half note. If you look at the tonalization studies in the other books, it's all 8th notes, and it's not really 8th notes, it's just groupings. With the 8th note, we have the beam that shows that those notes go together. It's not really 8th notes. But the beginner version of this has written out quarter note, half note. That way the students slow down the process of learning this. We don't want them to be going da 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 dee da da da, and that's going to help them learn this stuff better. And actually, I'm not too much in learning things fast, but this is a way to learn things faster. So that's the second module that we put in here. The third module used to be the all 20 of the exercises for each key up to the C that's consistent with our Trumpet Pioneer level. So the whole second half of the book is these more advanced exercises that aren't necessarily meant for the beginners. These are for range limiting. If you haven't seen my one range book, that book just explains the whole range limiting process. We build our chops by having easier days, and you make the easier days easier by limiting the range. So let's say, for example, your range goes up to G at the top of the staff. On your quote-unquote easy day, you can use these exercises on the second half of this Pioneer book because it's got all 20 of the exercises in all 12 keys. Now, the beginners can use that as long as they do the other stuff in order first. If you learn the exercises that lead up to that part of the book, and you want to have some extra credit, so to speak, then you can experiment with those more advanced exercises and the more advanced keys. I do stress in the book that if you're going to do the more advanced keys, that you should get my major scale expansion studies and do those major scale expansion studies for the keys that you're going to do. I say that in the book. Okay, now that's what the book is. You've got, oh, and let me tell you this. The reason I ended up putting them all together is because it was just too difficult. The way I had students doing it before, they would do out of this module for the expansion studies, out of this module for the tonalization studies, and then we'd go back to the other module and then back to here. This book fixes all that. That's why I blended it. The way the book is set up, there's a series of, I think, 8 steps. Step 1 is expansion studies in that key. Step 2 is tonalization studies in that key, and we have check marks. You're going to do them a certain number of times. I say check marks. If you put the date that you finished on there, okay, and then when you're done with step 2, you do the expansion studies in the next key. See, that wasn't possible. Well, it was possible. It wasn't as convenient with the way we had it set up in the module system. So that's what the book is. Now let's talk about who should buy it. I think the most important is that the teachers should buy it. Now, I understand most teachers, because I'm not selling to most teachers. I'm not trying to push this on everybody. Most teachers have their beginner method already. I'm not trying to creep in on that. Okay? If you are a teacher that teaches beginners and you haven't really found something that works the way you want it to work, I strongly encourage you to get this book for your students. That's the first who. Now the second who is, if you are a beginner, this book is going to work for you. Now, I wrote the language in the book is as if I'm speaking to another teacher, not to a student. I would probably not normally talk to a student the way I wrote the text. The reason I did that, most students don't read that stuff anyway. I mean, let's be honest, even the adults don't read that stuff, okay? Now, I remember making a decision 30 years ago that I would write the text for the people who do read it. And this is the way I write almost everything. Yes, it's true, most people don't read it. There are some who do. So I'm writing, the text in the book is written in a way that people who want to read are going to enjoy it. They're going to benefit from it. Okay? So if you are a beginner and you want to use my system to learn your, well, I don't like calling it scales, it's keys. You're learning the keys. You use scale exercises to learn the key. Okay? We're not learning scales. We're learning keys. Okay? And if this is something that you want to be really good at, I mean awesome good at, then this is how you start. This book gets you your foot in the door. We do have the next level is available. It just doesn't have the expansion studies in it. That's what we want to change. We want to upgrade all of these so they have the expansion studies. It's going to take a little while, but that's our hope, God willing. That's our hope to do that. Okay, so that's the second who. We want to make sure that beginners have this available. Now, a third who is comeback players. If you want to make your comeback very easy, treat yourself, when it comes to the scales, treat yourself like a beginner. I have students that do that, right? I teach a lot of comeback players. Most of them are online. I teach Skype lessons, right? And a lot of times they'll tell me that specifically. They'll say, Eddie, I want you to teach me as if I'm a beginner. And when they do that, we're going to go, now that this book is going to be available, I'm going to use this that way with my comeback players when it seems like they need it. I don't just like blindly make everybody do something. I don't ever do that. If you already like play Carnival of Venice and stuff like that, I don't think we're going to go all the way back to the beginner stuff. Right? So, so I'm not saying everybody. But yes, if you're a comeback player and you would like to have a solid foundation coming back into it, this book will work for you. It will be dreadfully boring, and that doesn't work. If you are a comeback player, I strongly recommend that you look at my comeback player series. I have a whole series of videos for comeback players, and not everything is true for every comeback player. Some comeback players, the reason they want to do this is playing trumpet brings them joy. And they have no desire to have any more joy over and above what they do, the sounds that they make on the horn here and now. And for them to practice dreadfully boring exercises is not part of that. And I can't blame them for not wanting to do this. These exercises, if you are a comeback player, are going to be dreadfully boring if you do them correctly. I'm not apologizing for that. They are dreadfully boring, but the benefits you'll get from doing those dreadfully boring exercises, it's like night and day. The difference between someone who does this to come back to the trumpet and someone who doesn't. Now, there's one more who that I'd like to add to this list. Who should buy this book? And those are people that really think they learned wrong in the first place. Now let me tell you, I have to mention a big caveat right here. If you learned wrong to begin with, depending on how wrong it is, it can be a huge struggle to straighten things out. Because, we're not talking about working on an inanimate object. We're talking about changing the way you think. I have a student right now that his original teachers really screwed him up. Really bad. Most of them didn't play trumpet. And we went through a process. This book didn't exist when he started. But we went through a process very similar to this. Now he's playing in all 12 keys. I'm not saying he can sight read fluently or anything like that. Not, he's, but the point is the progress he's made because of this approach. This going back to that foundation. Going back to playing these easy things over and over again. So I talk a lot about doing them properly. What I really mean when I say that, among other things, is that they should be repeated 10 times. And that's the dreadfully boring part. You never get to a spot, if you do this right, you never get to a spot in the exercises that they become a challenge. Even as a beginner, if you do them right, there are other things that go on in the category of doing them correctly. For example, you're supposed to be focused. You're supposed to be deliberate. You're supposed to be aware but not afraid. I talk about all of this stuff in the book. It is possible to turn off all of the benefits just with your attitude. That is possible. I wish I could find a way around that, but I haven't been able to find that. The student's attitude towards the music. And this is why I tell people, my most ambitious students oftentimes end up being the worst players. I'm not saying the worst students. A lot of times they're the best students because they're so ambitious they do everything I tell them to. But they're also very uptight. And a lot of the stuff I teach doesn't work if you have that like hunger. I'm not sure that anyone can teach someone like that. That over ambition is poisonous. As far as I'm concerned, it's poisonous. This can be like the antidote to that. If you can make yourself settle down and play these exercises slowly, deliberately, calmly, and repeatedly, 10 times on the first exercise. And if you make a mistake, that doesn't count, right? And if you do 10 times on the first exercise and the second exercise comes up, you shouldn't have any trouble with that exercise either. Well, another thing that, talking about doing it properly, you don't play the next exercise until you know all the fingerings. Don't even start playing until you know that. So in this case, it's one new fingering. Look at that fingering. The book has a fingering chart in it. I call it a beginner trumpet fingering chart. Look at that first. Make sure you've got the right fingering. Don't just jump in there and try. A lot of people, that's how they practice, especially as beginners. Oh, let's just jump in there and try. You establish all kinds of bad habits when you do that. And bad attitudes. So those are the 4 groups of people that I think should buy this book. Now let's talk about why should they buy the book. As opposed to, there's literally hundreds of books out there that will claim to do what my book does. Why do I think this is better? Isn't that kind of arrogant? I know, I've been self-publishing books since 1990. Actually, the first books weren't published formally. I would make them for my students. So that goes back to about 1988. But I've been publishing books since 1990. And from the very beginning, people have said, who is he that he has written a book? And that's even more exaggerated back then because that was 30 years ago. 35 years ago now. Almost 40 years ago. Who is he? And you can still say the same thing about me now. Who do I think I am that I would recommend my book over Arbin, Herbert L. Clark. Now, I never told anybody don't buy those books. I don't know what the big deal is. I had a famous trumpet player chew me out for not like bowing down and worshiping the Arbin book. So, didn't bother me because I knew he didn't understand what I was saying. Right? I tell everybody to get the Arbin. I tell everybody to get the Clark. I tell everybody to get Schlossberg. But why would I have the beginners or the comeback players or the people on that, the four people on that list of people who I think should buy this book? Why would I suggest this instead of those traditional staples? Because this is set up already for you. It's step by step, simple steps. If you don't want to read the text, don't read the text. Skip straight to step one. I wrote it that way on purpose, knowing people wouldn't read the text. Right? You get the benefit without understanding it. You can get 100% benefit by skipping all the text and just doing what I just told you now. Be deliberate, be slow, be careful. Oh, that's the word I was trying to think of earlier. I think I said something. I said something else. In the book I say careful but not fearful. Be calm. If you follow those instructions and do these books, do these exercises in the book, you will see benefits that far outweigh any benefits you get from the Arbin book. I'm talking to you in those people in those four categories. The Clark book, the Schlossberg book. Those books weren't written for beginners. Not absolute beginners. There are some beginner materials in the Arbin book that assume you've already been playing for a while. This book will help you get to where you can play the Arbin. I know to a lot of people who worship the Arbin book, this is sacrilege. Oh, how dare you? But I'm publishing this based on decades of experience working with students. Decades of experience. This book didn't just pop up overnight. This wasn't just some idea I had and ran with it. This is an idea I had in the 80s that I perfected for myself. I've had dozens of students make all-state, talking about the high school level, right? I've had students that are now teaching trumpet in university. I have students that tour the world. I don't mention their names because, and I know for that reason a lot of people won't believe me, but I think it's important because people have done this to me before. They've taken credit for the things that I did, and I happen to know that the credit that they take was tiny compared to the stuff I've figured out. I don't mean to be ungrateful. I'm grateful to those teachers, and I tell them precisely why I appreciate them and stuff like that. But I don't want to take credit for students that I've taught and say, oh, they're good because of me. Because you know what? The real reason why people say that is so that you will take lessons with them. That's how this works. It's my reason for not wanting to do that is biblical. I'm not going to manipulate people into taking lessons with me or buying my books. I hope that makes sense. So yes, there are a lot of people who will say, oh, it's wrong for you to not mention the names because we want to look and see if it's true that your past students are teaching university, that your past students are touring the world in bands, that your past students are some of the top players in different cities. I'm not going to tell you who they are because I don't want to take credit, but it's true. I have taught students that have those successes, and I'm very proud of them for that. I even have jazz students, that are extremely successful. I'm talking about best in the world success. I won't ever take credit for what they've done, what they've accomplished. If they ever decide to come back later, I know I'm off on a tangent. If they ever decide later to come back and say, Mr. Lewis, I appreciate what you've done for me, that's them. That's their choice. I won't take that from them. That said, I don't judge other people who do. Right? So, anyway, so the why, the answer to why right now, the answer to why is that this is better. This is a better way to learn the keys than those traditional staples that are out there. That's why. You will have a much more solid foundation in the keys that you're learning by using this book and doing it properly. Now, I should say that this is the first book in a system of books, and when we talk about being like a teacher at a university or traveling with a famous band or stuff like that, those aren't people that only played at this level in my system. So we're kind of assuming that if you get started on this book, you're going to go to the next book too, right? The next book after this is the Trumpet Tonalization Studies. And you can use them as they are. They're available online. The book is available. We are going to update it so that the expansion studies are included. That's what we want to change with that. We want to make it just like this book. We want to get all the books caught up with that same format. But that's the why. That's the why. We want you to have that opportunity to be better. And this book does that in a way that the other more famous books don't. Okay? I know that's people will say that's kind of arrogant. That's fine. That's on them. That's not. I know what I know. I know what works. I know what has worked for me. I know what has worked for my students. And that's as much of a sales pitch as you will ever get from me. There's a whole bunch of stuff in sales that I don't do. I've spelled it out for you. None of it is untrue. If you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to ask below. We're going to do one more video about this book. Basically talking about the instructions. Because like I said, I do know that there's a bunch of students that won't read the instructions. I would like for them to have the option to watch a video. Now I won't have a link in the book. Maybe when I post the book, I'll put a link to the next video. But anyway, that's something we're still working out. If you have any questions, ask below. You can also ask at our Trumpet Q&A that we try to have on Fridays. It's a live stream Q&A. You can ask your questions there live, and I'll answer you live. And we like when people come and hang out with us. So yes, you're invited to do that. Now, other than that, God bless you. We'll see you on the next video. Thank you very much.